Hello everyone, welcome to Mythstory, the show where we talk about myths from around the globe. For today's show, we're going to be talking about one of the main religions that existed in North America long before Christianity, Cherokee Mythology. The Cherokee were the largest tribe in the southeastern part of what would become the United States, inhabiting the mountainous regions of the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, until gold was discovered on their land and they were forcibly removed in 1838. Thousands of Cherokee died on that long march we now call the Trail of Tears. The Native American culture closely resembled the Aztec culture, hinting at the fact that these two groups were once joined but eventually lost contact. After the Trail of Tears, Cherokee mythology and religion became synonymous with children's fairy tales, but luckily, we still have many of their legends. So let's begin from the beginning. Creation. When all was water, the animals were in the heavens, but it was very much crowded, and they were wanting more room. They wondered what was below the water, and at last the little water beetle offered to go and see if it could learn. It darted in every direction over the surface of the water, but could find no firm place to rest. Then it dived to the bottom and came up with some soft mud, which began to grow and spread on every side until it became the island which we call the earth. It was afterward fastened to the sky with 4 cords, but no one could remember who did this. At first the earth was flat and very soft and wet. The animals were anxious to get down and sent out different birds to see if it was dry yet, but they found no place to rest and came back again to the heavens. Finally, they sent out the buzzard and told him to go and make ready for them. This was the great buzzard, the father of all the buzzards we see now. He flew over all the earth, low down near the ground, and it was still soft. When he reached the Cherokee country, he was very tired, and his wings began to flap and strike the ground. And wherever they struck the earth, there formed a valley, and where they turned up again, there formed a mountain. When the animals above saw this, they were afraid that the whole world would be in mountains, so they called him back, but the Cherokee country remained full of mountains. When the earth was dry and the animals came down, it was still dark, so they got the sun and set it on course to go across the island from east to west every day, just overhead. It was too hot this way, and the crawfish had his shell scorched a bright red. His meat was spoiled, and the Cherokee did not eat it. The animals raised the sun until it was just under the sky arch. Now it was just right, and they left it this way. There was another world under this, and it is like ours in every way, but with different seasons. The streams that come down from the mountains are the trails by which we reach this underworld, and the springs at their heads are the doorways by which we enter. When the animals and plants were first made, with no one knowing by whom, they were told to watch and keep awake for 7 nights. They tried to do this, and nearly all were awake through the first night. But the next night, several dropped off to sleep, and the third night, others were asleep, and then others, until on the 7th night, of all the animals, only the owl, the panther, and 1 or 2 more were still awake. To these were given the power to see and go about in the dark, and to make prey of the birds and animals which must sleep at night. Of the trees, only the cedar, the pine, the spruce, the holly, and the laurel were awake to the end, and to them it was given the ability to always be green, and to be the greatest for medicine. But to others it was said, "Because you have not endured to the end, you shall lose your hair every winter." Men came after the animals and plants. At first, there were only a brother and sister, until he struck her with a fish and told her to multiply. And so it was. In 7 days a child was born to her, and thereafter every 7 days another, and they increased very fast until there was danger that the world could not keep them. Then it was made that a woman should have only 1 child in a year, and it has been so ever since. The first fire. In the beginning there was no fire, and the world was cold, until the thunders sent their lightning and put fire into the bottom of a hollow sycamore tree, which grew on an island. The animals knew it was there because they could see the smoke coming out at the top, but they could not get to it from across the water. The animals held a council to decide what to do. Every animal that could fly or swim was anxious to go after the fire. The raven offered, and because he was so large and strong, they thought he could surely do the work, so he was sent first. He flew high and far across the water and landed on the sycamore tree, But while he was wondering what to do next, the heat had scorched all his feathers black, and he was frightened and came back without the fire. The little screech owl volunteered to go and reach the place safely. But while he was looking down into the hollow tree, a blast of hot air came up and nearly burned out his eyes. He managed to fly home as best he could, but it was a long time before he could see well again. Then the hooting owl and the horned owl went, but by the time they got to the hollow tree, the fire was burning so fiercely that the smoke nearly blinded them, and the ashes carried up by the wind made white rings around their eyes. They had to come home again without the fire, but with all their rubbing, they were never able to get rid of the white rings. Now no more of the birds would venture, and so the snake, the black racer, said he would go through the water and bring back some fire. He swam across to the island and crawled through the grass to the tree, and went in through a small hole at the bottom. The heat and the smoke were too much for him too, and after dodging about blindly over the hot ashes until he was almost on fire himself, he managed to get out again through the same hole. But his body had been scorched black. He came back, and the great black snake, the climber, offered to go for fire. He swam over to the island and climbed up the tree on the outside, but when he put his head down into the hole, the smoke choked him so that he fell into the burning stump. And before he could climb out again, he was turned black. They held another council, but birds, snakes, and four-footed animals all had some excuse for not going, because they were all afraid to venture near the burning sycamore. Until at last, the water spider said she would go. She can run on top of the water or dive to the bottom, so there would be no trouble to get over to the island. But the question was, how could she bring back the fire? The spider spun a thread from her body and wove it into a bowl, which she fastened on her back. Then she crossed over to the island and through the grass to where the fire was still burning. She put one little coal of fire into her bowl and came back with it, and ever since, we have had fire. The Deluge. A long time ago, a man had a dog, which began to go down to the river every day and look at the water and howl. At last, the man was angry and scolded the dog, which then spoke to him and said, "Very soon there is going to be a great flood, and the water will come so high that everybody will be drowned. But if you will make a raft to get upon when the rain comes, you can be saved. But you must first throw me into the water." The man did not believe it, and the dog said, "If you want a sign that I speak the truth, look at the back of my neck." He looked and saw that the dog's neck had the skin worn off, so that the bones stuck out. Then he believed the dog and began to build a raft. Soon the rain came, and he took his family, with plenty of provisions, and they all got upon it. It rained for a long time, and the water rose until the mountains were covered, and all the people in the world were drowned. Then the rain stopped, and the waters went down again, until at last it was safe to come off the raft. Now there was no one alive but the man and his family. But one day they heard a sound of dancing and shouting on the other side of the ridge. The man climbed to the top and looked over. Everything was still, but all along the valley he saw great piles of bones of the people who had been drowned. And then he knew that the ghosts had been dancing. Cherokee mythology is filled with myths about the animals they lived with and their origins. Their stories are less about the gods and more about moral lessons. Thanks for watching this episode of Mythstory on Cherokee Mythology. Make sure to like and subscribe, and tell us what mythology you want us to cover next in the comments below. And if you really love us, consider supporting us on Patreon and checking out our new website, MilwaukeeAtheists.com. We also have an official merch store where you can buy classic Milwaukee Atheist garb. We'll see you next time.